Good evening, kiddos. Let's see what delights I have in store for you tonight, shall we? My dad and I would occasionally go hunting together when I was a kid. I was 14 and my dad knew a guy who owned what seemed to be half of Georgia. I mean, the amount of property this guy owned was ridiculous. We let people hunt out there, and if he trusted you, he'd let you camp out there for a couple of nights if you wanted. He'd always make sure we had a way to call for help. I loved camping out there more than I did just going hunting for a few hours and coming home. I liked the woodsman feel of living out in the woods. We woke up early one morning and hiked into the woods. It was still dark when we got to our stand. We didn't see or hear anything, not even birds. I remember my dad commenting on it, and looking back, it should have been a sign. Frustrated, we packed up and looked for a spot to camp, and we would set up again later that evening. My dad suggested we go deeper in to better our chances of seeing something, so that's what we did. We hiked for a few hours, found a clearing, set up a small camp, got settled, and passed the time freaking ourselves out by talking about Bigfoot and other woodland creatures. We hiked a ways away from our camp, set up our blind, and waited. Again, nothing. We get back and our tent has been pulled up and laid flat. Not in a neat way, but it's just kinda laying there. We thought it was just the wind or something, or maybe we didn't put it upright and it collapsed. We didn't think much of it. Since we didn't see or hear anything all day, we decided to leave the following day and try it again later that week. We settled in for the night, built a really small fire, and just relaxed. Again, not even birds are making a sound. I remember thinking how odd it was to be this deep into the woods and only hear one or two birds the whole trip. Oh well, maybe we were making too much noise and scared everything off. We go to sleep soon after settling in. It's pitch black, middle of the night. I wake up for some reason just to try to go back to sleep. I'm in that half asleep, half awake phase when I hear laughter. I kind of jolt awake, but don't hear it anymore, so I figured it was a dream. I lay back down, and a few moments later, I hear it again. It continues to get pretty loud. I wake up again, but this time my dad is up too. He whispers and asks, "Did you hear that?" And that is when my heart dropped. He heard the laughter too. It wasn't a dream. We heard it again, but it was faint, and now I'm actually awake. I'm paying attention to it. It sounded kind of like several people laughing in unison. It wasn't cackling or hysterical laughter, but just kind of a normal laughter. It didn't last but maybe 5 to 6 seconds. I've never felt that much fear before in my entire life. We didn't hear it anymore after that, but needless to say, we didn't get any sleep. We packed up as soon as the sun came up and got out of there. My dad was convinced someone followed us and was playing a prank. That's why we didn't see anything. He said while we were in the stand, they were scaring all the wildlife off with their unmasked scent and being on the ground. He says this, but he didn't go back out there for over a month. When he did finally go back, he mentioned it to the guy who owned the property. He wouldn't let my dad hunt there anymore. Didn't say why either. My dad thinks he made the guy think my dad was crazy or something. I guess it was possible for someone to follow us out there. They must be legit ninjas though, because we went out there before daybreak. Nobody but the owner was parked out there that morning. There were dead leaves and sticks everywhere, and when they decided to laugh, it came from different spots, and I never heard a footstep. Some friends and I were doing some night fishing on the James River. We were sitting along the shoreline with a nice fire going, accompanied by the usual idle talk and a few beers, when suddenly everyone just stopped talking, like a switch was flipped off. We were all staring across the river and felt as if something or someone was staring back. It was a very uneasy feeling. to which some of the group tried to shake off with the typical macho humor, when a blood-curdling sound erupted from the other shore that froze everyone in their tracks. This sound was unlike any other that I have heard, and it made every hair on my body vibrate and tingle. The only way I could describe it is it sounded like a wild person with no language skills being gutted alive. No words, just this high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. Nobody moved or said a word. We all just sat there fixed in our stare, when just as suddenly a second scream was let loose with even more force than the first. By this time, several of us were sprinting to our trucks that were parked within 20 or 30 feet and retrieving various firearms. We all sat there quietly with our eyes fixed, staring toward the opposite shore, watching the light from our fire reflecting off the rocks. Hours later, we packed it up and left, feeling very unsettled. We never did figure that one out, or even hazard a guess as to what was on the opposite bank. It was very early in the morning, around 2-3 a.m., and I was in a very open area waiting for my boss to return with some equipment. As I was waiting, I got the feeling like I was being watched by something that didn't want me there and had some intent on harming me. I stood up and looked around. The moon was very bright that night, and I could clearly see all the way to the tree lines, probably 50 yards, both sides of me. Nothing around. I calmed down a bit and took my pack off my back to get my drink out. As I opened my drink, I hear this whoosh sound flying through the air from behind me. It was like the sound that a stick makes when you throw it overhead. I literally dove out of the way with my bag falling to the ground and my drink flying through the air, spilling as I jumped away. I recover from my diving experience and take my radio out of my bag to radio my boss. I say, "I'm not trying to freak you out or anything, but I'm on my way back to the shop. I just had something thrown at me." As I'm talking to him, I'm looking around on the snowy ground for anything that could have been hurled at me. There was nothing on the ground but snow. I had no idea what the hell was going on at this point. His reply of, "I've already got a head start on you, I'll see you there," sounded out of breath like he was running. I gathered my stuff and started hauling ass back to the shop. I get back and meet up with my boss, and he's pacing back and forth in our shop freaking out. I get him to calm down, and he tells me he was on his way back up to me when he got the same feeling I got before. I get him to calm down, and he tells me he was on his way back up to me when he got the same feeling I got before something got thrown at me. He said after he got the feeling, he stopped to look around and heard something clearly two-legged start walking towards him, barely crunching in the snow. Then he said it started running at him, but there was nothing in sight. All of the sounds of movement stopped, and he froze to listen for more sounds. Then, he said, a hot breath was hitting the back of his neck when he proceeded to freak out. He said he ran the whole way back to the shop, and about halfway back is when he heard me on the radio. The crazy part about this whole thing is the area where we were working has several burial mounds in the woods from Native Americans. Apparently, there also used to be an altar of some kind made out of stone that was buried during a construction project a few decades ago. Well, that's all I have in store for tonight, kiddos. If you're braver than most, please feel free to check out my previous videos. If you would like to add one of your own stories to my library, you can always use my contact information below. I'm always looking to grow my library with more frightening tales. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the next main character in one of my stories.